The MLT3, Skills, Context, and Content. Now, one of the things that sets MLT apart from my perspective is the focus on skills. What can students do? Now, lots of other approaches have taxonomies of patterns that students can learn, but MLT is unique in that it asks the question, well, what can students do with those patterns? What can students do with the content? Gordon has organized all of the musical skills into his skill learning sequence, which you can see here. There are two broad types of learning in this skill learning sequence. We have, on the left-hand side, discrimination learning, and on the right-hand side, inference learning. In discrimination learning, all the information is given to students. You might say that the student is being taught this information. And the levels are along the left-hand side: the oral level, the verbal association level, the partial synthesis level, symbolic association level, and the composite synthesis level. On the right-hand side, you have inference learning, and you might say that inference learning is where students teach themselves. I'm going to go through the skill learning sequence in much more depth, but I'll just give you a little bit of a taste right now. Let's begin at the oral level. At the oral level, students listen and speak. Oral, A-U-R-A-L, implies that they're listening, and O-R-A-L, or oral, applies that they're going to speak. So they might listen to a pattern like bum, 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 and they listen to that pattern and they echo that pattern. Bum, 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 or bum, 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 and they echo bum, 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 bum. Or maybe a rhythm pattern like ba, 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 ba. They hear it and they echo ba, 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 ba. Notice that at the oral level, I am not using any syllables or any solfege at all. At the oral level, the sound itself is fundamental. Oral, in through the ears; oral, out through the mouth. And then that process continues, oral, because they're going to oral their oral and check themselves for understanding. Next is verbal association. At the verbal association level, we're going to give names to the patterns, the very same patterns that we heard at the oral level. So we're going to hear bum, 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 and we're going to name it do, mi, so. And we're also going to label the functions that's coming up. So we've got major tonic, and we're also going to label tonalities. Major tonality. Ba, 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 ba. We need to give that a verbal association. And if you're in MLT, you're going to say do, day, do, day, do. And we're going to label those do, day, do, day, do's, macro, micro patterns. And we're going to label the meter as duple meter. So we're giving labels to all the things that we just heard at the oral level. We're going to label solfege, we're going to label functions, and we're going to label tonalities and meters. And we'll do that in major, in minor, and duple, and triple. Next, if we continue to go down the discrimination side, you'll see partial synthesis, and that's where students are taught to discriminate between contexts. So they're going to hear major and minor paired up against each other and compare the two. They're going to hear duple and triple compared against each other and learn to distinguish between the two, to discriminate between the two. Next, at the symbolic association level, students are going to learn to read those very same patterns that they audiated at the oral and verbal association level. So they're going to learn to read do, mi, so, fa, re, ti, and they're going to learn to read do, day, do, day, do, and do, da, dee, do, da, dee, do. The very same content that they learned at the oral and verbal association, and to some extent at the partial synthesis level, that very same content they're going to learn to read at the symbolic association level. Patterns, or musical words. Then at the composite synthesis level, they're going to take those words that they learned and they're going to learn to chain them together with other words. And in addition to that, they're going to be able to derive musical context from what they read. Now, a reminder, at the inference level, students are guided in how to teach themselves. Students learn to infer the unfamiliar on the basis of the familiar. So at the generalization level, students can identify if something is the same or different. Bum, 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 bum. Those are obviously different. Bum, 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 bum. Those are different. Obvious to you and me, but maybe not so obvious to a kindergartner. Bum, 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 bum. One was major, one was minor. We can have students translate from a neutral syllable to rhythm syllables or tonal syllables. Bum, bum, bum. What's that? Do, mi, so. Bum, 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 bum. What's that? So, fa, re, ti. Ba, 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 ba is do, day, do, do, to, day, to, do. Good. Ba, 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 ba. Do, ta, to, do, day, do, ta, to, do. Students can listen to familiar or unfamiliar music and identify the tonality. They can identify chord functions. They can identify rhythmic functions. Students can quote-unquote sight read music. So much cool stuff happens at the generalization level. At the creativity improvisation level, students can take familiar content that's already in their audiation and rearrange it and put it in different orders. So if they know do, mi, so, and so, fa, re, ti, and do, day, do, day, do, why couldn't they create their own songs? Bum, 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 ba-da-da-da-dum, bum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, 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 ba-da-dum, bum, 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 bum. And then theoretical understanding is just the why of music. You might just call it music theory. And it's last on this list because, according to Gordon, it should be taught last. Let's talk about context. Context is extremely important in language. Consider the phrase, thanks a lot. Now, depending upon what just happened, thanks a lot can have a lot of different meanings. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Well, context can mean very, very different things in music. I was just at an airport, and about 38 times throughout my time at the airport, I heard this. Because my audiation is strong, I can think of lots of different contexts for those two little pitches. So it's G and E, or the descending minor third. So my mind always immediately goes to Do as the resting tone. So, mi, do. But I like to play little games with myself and hear other contexts for G, E. For example, it could be so, mi, do, la. G and E could be do and la. It could be part of a Locrian tonic chord. And so music learning theory seeks to hang everything that we do in music upon the syntactical structure of a tonality or a meter. Skills, context, content. Well, what is content? Functions and patterns. What do I mean by functions? So functions represent working aspects of tonality or meter. So in rhythm, for instance, the layers of the beat. Macrobeat. Microbeat. Divisions are all functions, rhythmic functions. We mentioned some of these earlier, but tonal functions are harmonic functions. Major tonic, dominant, subdominant, supertonic, etc. Those are all functions. So what is content? Functions and patterns that fall within that category of functions. Like do, mi, so is a pattern within the function tonic in the context of major. So, fa, re, ti is a pattern within the dominant function in major tonality. And that's skills, context, and content.
Are you a music teacher interested in teaching from an audiation perspective? Then the faculty library may be just what you need. It has all of my patterns, tunes for teaching, and teacher videos all in one place. Scan the QR code or click below to find out how to take advantage of all the great resources for your classroom in the faculty library.